Hello and welcome to the Sac Off podcast. This is the premiere debut episode where myself in Sacramento, being the local guy, and my good friend Oscar Hayes will be talking about the Sacramento Kings every week. Oscar, how you doing?
I'm good. Excited for this. Don't get much chance to talk in my voice about the Sacramento Kings. So it'll be fun to do this each week. And yeah, should be fun.
Absolutely. I mean, because we back and forth would tweet at times about Sacramento Kings, and just said, why not start a podcast? Guy in London, guy in Sacramento. Seems like the perfect fit.
Yeah, I think I've got the perfect market of I do podcasts about Miami Dolphins generally and like tweet about that. So good marketing plan of a huge market of Miami Dolphins and Sacramento Kings fans. So I think we've got our PR down.
Oh, it's nailed down. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find a Miami Dolphins fan who doesn't have a Sacramento Kings tattoo.
Yeah, they're all right next to the Dan Marino ones, generally.
Yeah.
Or lots of dolphins with crowns.
Yes. Yes. It's a very fine image that, although the placement of some of the tattoos isn't good.
I like above the belly button for the dolphin, the old dolphin logo, but with a crown instead of a helmet. I think that works.
Yeah.
That's what I'll go for when I get a beer belly.
Looking forward to it. And when that happens, we will live stream the tattoo process. So
yeah, that should be good. Can be for the finals preview.
Absolutely.
There's ever one.
Yeah, actually, no. When for the finals preview, we're both going to get a Dolphins with the Kings tattoo. So there you go. It's going to be. These are the things you have to look forward to on the Kings podcast. So on today's show, we're going to talk about 538's new thing that they've come out with, Carmelo Predictor. And so actually, I'll have Oscar lead off just a little bit about what it is and how he found it.
Well, I think they came out with it about a week ago. And I just thought as we're going to go through kind of the roster, just as we go through each positional group and talking about the players, I thought it'd be interesting to kind of look at the range of projections this predictor comes up with. So they kind of look at, I believe it's 13 different weighted averages from the past 3 seasons, as well as age, I think draft position and minutes. And then they come up with a 0 to 100 score and show you the top 10 comparisons at that same age, so the same age in their career, to kind of give you a range of possibilities for their career. They give kind of a 90th to 10%, 10th percentile range of where they'll land. So they kind of look at height, weight, draft position, age, minutes played, true shooting percentage, free throw percentage, usage, 3-point frequency, free throw frequency, assist percentage, turnover percentage, rebound percentage, block percentage, steal percentage, and defensive plus minus. So it's quite simple in terms of what they're looking at, but because it's so simple, then there's going to be you kind of have to use your own initiative when looking at it and the context of each player. But then as we're looking at kind of one roster, it's kind of easy, and we kind of know the roles somewhat of each player. We can kind of determine what's the most likely outcome for that. So it should be interesting. And I think so it's only with players that have played at least 100 minutes in the last 3 seasons. So guys like David Stockton, Eric Moreland, Seth Curry won't make it. They do have it for Willie Cauley-Stein because they use, I think, ESPN's stats and info, and it's just slightly different and even more kind of tailed down. So we'll just kind of reference kind of any interesting kind of comparisons, and generally if it's around 60 to 50 similarity range. That's pretty good. So there's quite a few players on the Kings roster that within that range, and then some that don't have any that are close. In particular, Rondo, and I guess that's just because there's not many players that would have played as much and like play the way he does. But so shall we get into like the point guard position first?
Yeah, absolutely. I think with what you mentioned with Rondo, that's a great place to start looking at just how they have on the Kamala projection of how, because really he is one of the more interesting ones. I mean, you mentioned that with his minutes and just a different style of play from him. Some of his comparisons have been, and the similarity score, obviously we mentioned the 50, 60, those are pretty close comparisons. What you get down to the highest things with Rondo, which we're looking at the low 40s and 29s and 28s. So there's a lot out there.
And they're all guys that have like all his comparisons are from 2009 down, so that maybe that kind of shows just like the type of player he is like almost redundant now in the NBA, being like a point guard that has a really low true shooting percentage, really bad at free throws, doesn't shoot threes, add to like a high click, turns the ball over. So it's kind of interesting. It's like maybe he's just like a type of player we don't see much of, and then that's why there aren't really similarities, or they're all kind of old similarities. So that's kind of, to me, that's like the more interesting part. And then also just because he's come off 2 down years, so then that kind of changes. Generally, the knee injury he had, like I think his game's kind of changed where he's not as explosive to the basket, but you see in quite a lot of sports after kind of 2 years coming off that injury, if he's either going to look better now or will never be the same. Can't really tell from preseason, as generally when he's attacked the hoop, it's been kind of to a clean lane or like people sagging off. So can't really tell if he's got that explosion back, but he's can definitely get to the basket with just kind of like craftiness. So, and he was hitting shots. I think he was hitting jumpers at a better rate than free throws so far in preseason. So that's kind of interesting. I don't really think, and I don't know, is there any kind of the comparable players that jump out to you? To me, there's not really any that are really in my, that I kind of know of as players really, or think are hugely relevant.
Yeah, I mean, looking at these players, I mean, the one he's most compared, the two he's most, Jamal Tinsley in 2008, Pooh Richardson in 1996. I'll just say this right now. During Pooh Richardson's 1996 season, I was 3 years old, so I'd have no memory of how well Pooh Richardson played. But I think the point you brought up about, the comparisons being much earlier, like to the 1990s, early 2000s, and just because Rondo's a different type of point guard than the ones we're seeing today. You mentioned the true shooting percentage, the free throw percentage. On the scale, it's almost tipping off the thing. It's in the red. It's far past the red. It's area he doesn't really contribute much in, although hopefully, you'll see a little bit better of the true shooting percentage this year. Assists is way up there, but the turnover percentage is way down. So it's just, yeah, I think what you brought up is that it's hard to find something more current for him. And it's just, so these comparisons, I don't know, considering the ACL and as you mentioned, the recovery time, it's hard. I don't know. I feel like Rondo may be one player who kind of strays more away from these projections because he's not in the norm.
Well, they have kind of the top of his range of, so kind of like the graph they show in the range is using WAR, so wins above replacement projections. So kind of his roof is similar to his 2013 season, the year he got hurt. So I guess if that kind of makes sense to me in terms of like intuitively, like he could get to kind of back to that level. And just through preseason, like he's been getting like pretty aggressive, trying to steal the ball, in terms of defensively, I've liked the way he plays a pick and roll, in particular with Kufos. So they've been like pretty much always icing the side pick and roll. So that's when you're denying the ball handler to go above the screen and you're pushing them down the sideline. And last year we saw kind of the big come up way too high generally, and that makes it either an easy roll or easy to get to the basket, but if the big isn't quick enough to recover. But they've done a pretty good job of icing it and like trapping and then forcing. The idea is to then force the pop pass to the big who takes a long two. There's a couple of instances where it's been to like Matt Bonner, because most of the teams that have played side pick and roll were the Spurs against us. And then we saw like Caspi helping. I don't like helping there, is then you give another like helping one man away, then you give a pass to probably a better shooter, even though Bonner is a good shooter. But so like and then there's been a couple of times in when icing pick and roll where then the screen is turned and like had a down screen on, or like change the screen, so then the screen's going down to the baseline, and then Kufos has come up and taken away the penetration, and so that shows kind of good communication. So that's kind of, I think what you can at least see from Rondo is he's like very vocal, and you almost see there's a couple of plays where he's almost been directing guys and then finding an open shot. Pretty much all the time he's finding open shots. And there's been a couple of turnovers where, in particular with Ben McLemore, he's just passed it to him to a spot and Ben's either just read it wrong, because I'll trust Rondo that he's doing the right thing and Ben maybe isn't. But then hopefully that's something that Ben learns quickly. It's like, okay, if I want the ball, I better be in the place that Rondo thinks I'm going to be in. Is there anything in particular, like from watching preseason, that you've kind of taken away from Rondo at all?
Well, I mean, the one thing with him is just on the defensive end and just reminds me so much of football. He's like one of those cornerbacks. There'll be times to get burned, but with his instincts and how much film study he puts in, there'll be times where he's able to pick off that pass and at least a breakaway. And so I think he could be a good steals guy this year, just providing that. Defensively, I think he's been solid. I like what you mentioned a lot about the pick and rolls. But most importantly for me is just having a floor general out there, because that's something that this team's needed for a while. They've needed someone who can take command of the offense, call the plays for the team, and really just facilitate everything. And I feel like given more time with, you mentioned Ben McLemore maybe not being in the right spot, I think that will improve as time goes on. But just Rondo as a floor general, I think, is the most important thing he's going to bring this year.
He's been a bit reckless in transition, so I don't know if that's him trying to play faster or I don't know. Is that something you've kind of picked up on as well? I don't really kind of know how to like look at it, 'cause it's been like passes in transition. He's like thrown it to Boogie, who's been with like just outside the arc with two defenders in front of him, or like a bounce pass at Ben's feet under the hoop, and they've just kind of been like awkward transition plays. So I've been kind of surprised by, like, I think that's been his worst decision making, has been on the fast break.
Yeah, I mean, but I think the fast break is. But I think we're going to see him be more reckless this year. I think he's the type of guy who he's out to prove a lot this year, and he's going to take some chances and do some things that he shouldn't. But so it may be reckless, but also I think it's going to be there will be negatives to it, but I think there will be more positives that outweigh the negatives.
And maybe he's just testing the limitations of his teammates as well. Whereas in the half court, you can be kind of more measured and manipulate defenders. Whereas in the fast break, you're just kind of seeing what they can do. And kind of you see that chemistry with Ben and Gay on the fast break together. That's always really fun to watch, because they just have done it so much. So maybe that's just a thing where Rondo will get kind of used to where guys like it in the fast break. Should we move on to Darren Collison, who it sounds like he will be the backup, and like Carl's been like pretty adamant about that. I think after the Pelicans game, he said where he needs to prove is like being a leader of the reserves. So how do you feel about that role and his like position in it?
I definitely think it's a near guarantee that he'll be coming off the bench as the second guy. Um, I think it's going to take him a bit to get used to, but I think it can be the perfect role for him. I think pairing him with a guy like Marco, if he's able to become more of that commander that Carl's looking for, I think he'll be able to take control of that second unit and really, when this team needs a spark offensively or late in the fourth quarter, I think he can provide that.
It's going to be interesting. Maybe we won't see this as much in regular season, but he's been playing off ball a lot, even with the second unit and Marco, and like Marco taking over ball handling, and maybe that's just Marco wanting to shoot, so he wants the ball. So that'll be kind of interesting. But I think with he's been pretty good facilitating like off down screens. His passing's been pretty good. I guess he's used to being that sixth man with like the Clippers and a couple of other spots before that. He's kind of used to playing that. And then obviously I think we'll see him more playing with Rondo as well, that we haven't really seen yet. I think that was pictures from yesterday's practice where Rondo and DC were both wearing the same colours, so I would assume they were both on the same team that scrimmage. So maybe they're like hiding something from us all. But he looks kind of healthier after that surgery. I think there was like a couple of puff pieces about how he should have had like the surgery 3 or 4 years ago when he was with the Mavs. So that'll be kind of interesting as well. Should we? Were there any of his Carmelo comparable players that kind of jumped out to you? Because I thought his were quite like fitting, a couple of them anyway.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned some of the comparisons for him. I mean, and obviously, Jameer Nelson, 2010, Mo
Williams one is interesting.
Mo Williams, that's the one that sticks out to me the most.
Because I think he could be that kind of, and I guess like Mo Williams did this like a bit later on where he just has those huge scoring performances, and maybe so he'll be like a guy they just run with when he gets hot. So yeah, I thought the Mo Williams one jumped out to me as well, and I guess Jameer Nelson as well. He's kind of similar ilk, and that's a 64 similarity with Jameer Nelson, 55 with Mo Williams. So yeah, I thought they were kind of interesting. Bino Udrich as well, again 2011. So yeah, I thought they were. That was kind of. I thought those were nice kind of comparisons, and it's just going to be nice to have someone that's like someone that played so well last year coming off the bench is going to be like really different. But I don't think there's like anything new in his game to really expect. Maybe just more frees. I think one kind of issue I had with him last year is he kind of had to come off the screen for those mid-range jumpers off the dribble a lot to get him rhythm. Already this season, he's just been like happy to be off ball and catch and shoot on the perimeter. So I think that's like good that he's been hitting them. So I think that's good that kind of like he doesn't need to kind of get loose as much to get a shot. So, and maybe that's kind of being healthier has helped. Is there anything else you're kind of looking for Darren to do this year?
I mean, yeah, I just feel like I keep going back to the Mo Williamson, which it seems like perfect thing of just being able to provide that scoring punch off the bench. Because I feel like pairing him with Marco, it could be the perfect combo. And it's just, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, we'll get it into lineups, I think, after we do this. But yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to kind of have like a gunning backcourt, and then you kind of just have guys in the front court. And I don't think it really matters who's in the front court almost. Or with maybe Kufos is like perfect to be with them as just like a really good screener, and they both just come off screens and shoot threes and mid-range jumpers and just bomb away. So that would be kind of fun to watch. And Kufos sets really good screens, so I can kind of see why Carl is thinking about or has talked about Kufos coming off the bench. Should we move on to, I guess, so then the other two ball handlers are Seth Curry and David Stockton. So you would imagine one of them won't make the roster. Neither has played much in preseason, really. Should we start with Seth Curry?
Yeah.
I thought he looked good in summer league, just like creating more, but he wasn't really shooting that well. So that maybe that's even more impressive that he wasn't like reliant on his shot, where he kind of maybe has been in earlier times. I don't really expect him to play much unless there's an injury or Rondo fails and they trade him or something, as it's just an expiring contract. Are you kind of expecting more out of him at all?
I mean, as I told you, I think if it gets to the point where either David Stockton or Curry are seeing major playing time, Kings are in trouble. There's problems going on that are going to lead. So I think really, and one thing you mentioned about his summer league, I think that's the thing is he wanted to work on more making plays and creating rather than just shooting. And I think
Well,
we
he
saw
was
that.
shooting; he was just missing them.
Well,
um, but then yeah, he was like finding other ways to score or facilitate. So I think that's good in terms of like a range of game. It's just I'm not sure like how much you can play him or like I don't think you could play him and Darren Collison together. Just I don't think unless you're playing like the Trailblazers and they've got Lillard and but then even defensively you just both outgunning each other, but no one can stop anyone. Although I think Collison's like a better defender than like maybe his like measurables would suggest because he just puts a lot of pressure on the ball handler. But I don't think Seth Curry is particularly great defensively on ball or off ball. So I just I don't know how he works in that way. I can imagine games where he like gets 10 minutes and plays a little. And Stockton had that good game against the Lakers, but again, I mean, the Lakers were really bad those last two games and are going to be bad this year as well by the looks of things. Do you want to talk about Stockton at all, or not really?
I don't think he makes the team, so I don't. Yeah.
I think he seemed to have fun in Reno, and I think it'll be interesting if Seth Curry goes to Reno at all, because obviously he turned down a Pelicans contract to come here, so there must be some sort of reason to make that decision other than I think we gave him a second year option, so maybe that was enough to sway him.
Yeah.
All right, shall we move on to the wings? So wings kind of mean shooting guards that can play up to small forward. So should we start with, I guess, like who we'd assume the starter will be in Ben McLemore? What are you, before we get into like the comparable players, what do you think's like a realistic expectation of him this year, like areas you want him to improve?
I mean, the first thing I just want to talk about is because and this is something that happens. It's the overreaction to just small things. Like preseason or just after his first season, people were ready to abandon ship. It's just I feel like he needs time, and just if you overreact too immediately, it's going to be a problem. But I mean, just for me, shooting improve. I feel like I still feel I want to see him attack more. I still feel like this is the thing where Carl can help him. He can learn to attack more, get to the hole, get to the free throw line.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Getting to the free throw line, I think is important. He showed that I think the first couple of games he was like driving, getting in the air, and then just kind of throwing the ball away. Then the Lakers game, he was getting to the free throw line or like fighting through the contact. Again, that's like the Lakers guards are really bad at stopping penetration, so maybe that's not the best example. But I think that's like personally, I think that's like exactly right. Like you need him driving and like finishing or getting to the free throw line. And then like I do think they need to try and run some offense for him. And maybe if you have a starting lineup with Rondo and Willie Cauley-Stein in, then he becomes the third scoring option. And at least early on in games. So then maybe that kind of helps him with his confidence that he's getting shots and looks earlier in a game. But that was kind of my bone of contention last year, is that there'd be games where he would get hot and then he wouldn't see the ball until the fourth quarter again. And I think with a young player, if the times when he's hot, you should keep feeding him, especially like last year when like the season was over. It's like, what else have you got to do other than develop like your lottery picks? So I'd like to see that kind of, particularly like the corners. I think he shot 44% from the left-hand corner, like 39% from the right-hand corner, over 40% from above the break on the right. So I think they need to kind of run more like down screens for him, because I don't think he's going to really like shoot much off the dribble. So you kind of have to either get him the ball in space or like run like screens for him to get him shooting opportunities where he can be efficient. But his similarities are like pretty. If you were just to look at these and not have watched him play, I guess I'll give some like context for these. And I don't think there's going to be many of these players kind of had an easier road to minutes in terms of like competition. So maybe that somewhat skews these comparisons. But he does have like, he is pretty good in terms of like, he's pretty average in true shooting percentage, but I think that's good for a young player, and low in usage. So I guess that's why you get these comparisons, and then the 3-point tendency being around 50%. But if we just, I guess like his comparison coming out in the draft was always Ray Allen, so he's there at 51%. Then Gorwin Hayward, Jordan Hayward, even OJ Mayo, Mike Miller, Joe Johnson, Harrison Barnes, Jeff Green. So I think those are like all players that I think you'd be more than happy for him to. I mean, even OJ Mayo's like probably the worst of the bunch, and he's still being kind of. He had a good like a couple of years ago. He looked pretty good, and he's maybe not had the like work ethic that McLemore has. Well, I guess like Hayward to me was like the surprising one, and maybe Harrison Barnes. Was there any that kind of stood out to you, or is this just, did this get you like, to me this got me kind of like excited, but then it's like it doesn't really match the eye test for me?
I mean, I've always been excited, but I mean, this goes back to thing. And looking at some of his, like we mentioned, and I'm driving goal, getting free throws. His free throw frequency is at 20%. That's got to get up. It's just, I mean, I don't know, comparisons. I think OJ Mayo, you know, I kind of like that. Ray Allen was the ultimate dream comparisons that people had for him. But I think, yeah.
I mean, maybe Mike Miller's a good one where he's like low usage, shoots, and you just you surround him with talent. And I do think if Rondo looks to get him the ball in spots, I think that'll be really useful for his development as well, just to know where to be. But then it's going to be hard with Rudy and Boogie out there, who also want a lot of touches. So I think they've got to like sacrifice a bit to, at least early in the game, to think, okay, well, especially Boogie's like, okay, if I get Ben going, then that's going to give me more space and more time later in the game. So maybe he needs to kind of work that out as well. Because I guess like all these players know about like, oh, you need to have spacing, but then to understand how to manipulate teams to get more spacing is maybe something that is then that next step. And so you don't just like stick a shooter out there and that gives you spacing. You need that shooter to hurt them to get the spacing. So I've, like Ben can only do so much if he like isn't given opportunities. So I think they kind of have to, and I think maybe that would be like an indirect role of having two low scoring options in Willie Cauley-Stein and Rondo. Maybe that helps Ben's usage. So that's kind of one thing I'd be interested in, particularly in like a starting lineup if Ben does start. It does sound like the starting lineups are going to change, but I think that might be mainly the big positions. Was there anything else on like Ben other than I think that's like a really good point though. It's just like if we see his free throw frequency go up, I think that's a really positive sign this year. I just hope he doesn't get kind of like buried by Carl. Kind of worried about.
I mean, and you mentioned the usage. This is the other thing. Just with young players, what you mentioned how he would get hot and they'd go away from him. Build their confidence. It's a young player. They need that confidence to grow. We've seen in the past if the player doesn't have confidence, season just goes to heck and it's gone for them. To just maybe get that usage up, get him some open shots, get him the ball, and just let him get that confidence going, and I think we'll see a better player.
And maybe so we'll talk about like I guess Marco next. It doesn't sound like he's going to be a competition to start with him, but maybe he'll be a competition for minutes. So maybe that kind of helps, like having someone who is actually deserving to be on the floor when Ben isn't playing well. So maybe that kind of helps. So Marco's been really interesting to me in terms of he's not at least in preseason, he's not the player I thought he was going to be. And that's partly because he's been playing on the ball so much and like coming off ball screens and just shooting and like almost being a gunner. Or he has been a gunner, in particularly that first Portland game. He has like been shooting off ball as well. But yeah, I didn't expect him to be so good on the ball. I know you've got the GM survey, and he came up a bit in that. So obviously, some GMs like him were they like moving off the ball and like the best free agents. Like, do you want to go through what the GMs thought of him?
Definitely. So NBA.com did a poll of all GMs, gathering percentages for things like player forces, opposing coaches to make the most adjustments. But they also looked at things like most underrated offseason acquisition and best player moving without the ball. In Bellinelli's case, he was voted throughout the NBA fourth best player moving without the ball. Also ranked fifth biggest impact when coming off the bench in the NBA. And that's two things where I think, you talk about where he's been seeing more on ball.
Yeah, it's just been, but maybe that's just like he'd been playing international ball as well. So then he's just in a groove and wants to shoot. So if he's got the ball in his hands, he's going to shoot. There's not much offense put in yet. So maybe that's just a factor of that. And just when there's actually offensive sets in, then they'll look to get him more high percentage shots coming off screens with more space. See, he's been scoring a lot, but not at a particularly good percentage. I think he's been shooting with just like the mid 30s, and he's been shooting a lot from like off Kufo screens, like above the break. So I think there can be like better shots for him inside an offense. I think someone after that Portland game, someone asked if he was taking Spurs threes or Kings threes, and he said Kings threes. So I don't know if that means they're bad shots. So that's kind of funny. So I think that was a Carl quote. So we'll see if Carl gets him shooting like somewhere. I think Carl said, so we've got to get him somewhere in between. So that'll be interesting how that like manifests itself. But I think there's one comparable player who was 7th in his 10 most comparable players, but at 59 similarity point, and that's JJ Redick. So obviously he like coming off screens is just a master. So that like comparison that like really matches my eye test. And so yeah, I'm really interested in that one. So that I think that's kind of good, and he's kind of, as well as because they kind of show the charts of how their war goes up or like how their war continues. So that was JJ Redick 2 years ago, and then he's kind of got better. And then I guess you've seen players like Kyle Korver have got better of age as well. And he's predominantly coming off screen. So he's in a role where generally players start to regress at 29, the age Bellinelli is now, but maybe the way he plays has a little bit more longevity. So yeah, I thought that was a nice comparison. And yeah, he's just going to be fun to watch. I think he's going to be really fun. And I think he might be a guy you don't want to have in the end of games, because it's just every time he has the ball, he's just going to shoot. Although he's going to make them, I don't know if that might just get kind of annoying if he's not making them. But maybe it's better than like Rudy ISO. I don't know. It'll just be something interesting to watch. Kind of, I think the end of game lineups are going to be really interesting, just because there's so many guys that want to. If you could put up a lineup of just like people that want to take shots, but then obviously Marco has like a couple of years in that Spurs system where you give up good shots to give other people great shots, knowing that you'll get great shots later on. So whether that comes with him or not will be interesting. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on Marco before we get to, I guess, Coron next?
Well, just with the coming off screens, as you mentioned, JJ, right? I think that's the reason why. And obviously, because lines will change with the bigs, but I mean, Kufo's coming off the bench and helping set those screens. I think that's.
Oh, looks like we've lost Matt. Are you there? Looks like we lost Matt, so I'll keep talking. I guess we'll just move on. Are you back?
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry about that.
Okay. No problem. I see you're talking about Kufos and setting screens.
Oh, yeah, I just think Kufo setting screens, and that's one thing that Carl envisions with putting Kufos and Marco together.
Yeah, I think that'll be fun. And I guess like a real advantage over Jason Thompson is you're just getting like turnovers with the way he'd set screens. So yeah, it's a huge screen setting upgrade. It'll be interesting how Willie sets them, but maybe he won't really be asked too much, and more set like just stands on the weak side baseline and clean up. So that'd be kind of interesting how much they use Willie as a screen setter, whereas I guess Boogie kind of is a more of a rolling and pop threat. And Kufos has been pretty good, like rolling to the basket as well. Should we move on to Caron Butler?
Yeah.
So his projections aren't great, but I guess you're not really like. Oh, maybe before we get on to Caron Butler, should we talk about James Anderson actually? Because I think he's actually going to play more than Caron Butler. Carl seems to really like him. He doesn't really. I don't particularly like him. He doesn't really do much. Kind of, what's your thoughts on him? I think he played in Lithuania last year.
I think so, and I think he didn't play particularly well in Lithuania.
Okay.
Which that's going to tell you something.
But because we have quite a few coaches that came over from Philly, because they went to Philly from Denver, so he knows like the dribble drive stuff that came over with Vance Wahlberg. So I guess that's kind of like, and you see that whenever, every time he got the ball, if he didn't shoot a free, he initiated dribble drive offense. So maybe that's why they like him. He's turned the ball over quite a bit when he's initiated dribble drive. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of him, but I guess he's a guy that like he can shoot frees, and then you don't really need him to touch the ball. So maybe that kind of helps. His usage though is kind of similar to Ben, but then I guess he was on a Phillies team, so someone had to touch the ball at some point. But yeah, I think he's going to play. I think he'll probably be better than I think he will be, but I'm not particularly excited about him.
I mean, Carl's described him as, he's calling him an insurance blanket at shooting guard, small forward. I mean, he's a guy that the coaches are going to trust. Just go out there and do what they ask. There won't be any issues. So just do his role, and I guess
he got really sloppy the last couple of games, so I'm not sure. I think maybe it'll be interesting. I just don't see like the minutes for him. If you're giving like DC some minutes at the 2, I guess, and you're playing like Ben, Rudy, Marco, Gay, Caspi all at the 3 and 2 and 4. I just don't see he's taking minutes away from a better player, in my opinion.
He is, but the coaching staff likes him.
Okay. I guess I don't mind him in a lineup when you have DC, Marco, Gay, and Cousins. Maybe in a lineup like that, or even Ben, and where you have like loads of shooting and you just want someone to like play on like man defense on someone. Maybe that's kind of fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like I can't think of any of lineups I like where I would have him in over someone else.
I'm trying to go through my head of lineup where I could be fine with him. And
it's basically like a lineup where you have like a load of, you're just like resting someone. So maybe like if you're wanting to split up the minutes between Gay and Cousins, so you always have one of them on the floor, and then so you play James with either Marco or Ben at the 2-3, then like Gay, Caspi at the 4, something like that maybe.
All right, I found my lineup where I like them. Kings are up 30. Rudy Gay is sick that day, so they need someone.
But yeah, I think he'll probably be better than we're making, or like I think he'll be useful, and at least it's like he's probably going to be as useful as, or probably more useful than Nick Stauskas was last year. So I guess if you think of it that way, it's like he's not just going to leak. Should we move on to Caron Butler, who I guess is not really important in terms of like the player comparisons. I guess like Vince Carter's kind of like the one that makes sense to me, and like that's just like a cliff. It was really sad to see him like jam a dunk the other day, like didn't get close to it, and then thought he got fouled. So it might be a sign. But I mean, he just shoots threes now, so I think he'll play a little bit, but not a huge amount. Where would you play him? Would you play him shooting guard, small forward?
I think I would play him at small forward. I think I'd want Marco, and just with Gabe playing at the 4, I think I'd prefer Butler at small forward, maybe more minutes.
And it kind of feels like they're a bit thinner at the 3 than, especially if they're playing small more. Kind of needs someone, and because I kind of prefer Caspi as playing the 4 as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, he's not a great 3-point shooter, but he can at least knock down open ones. And I guess his value is like what he does off the court.
Yeah, I mean, just with him I don't know. He's kind of like, I'm blanking on the name from last year.
Andre Miller?
He's kind of like Andre Miller. I mean, in that NBA GM poll, he was received one of the like 5th vote getter for who will make the best coach someday among NBA players. So I mean, smart guy, respected across the league in the locker room. So I think what he does in the locker room, that's going to be his role.
All right, shall we move on to Rudy Gay then? So his comparable players are maybe like the most downward trending. So actually, his second most comparable player is Caron Butler from 2010. So that's quite funny. Then mixed in there is Lowell Deng from last year, Jaden Rose from 2010, Joe Johnson 2011. So kind of players on the descent. I guess you could caveat that with maybe him moving to playing more of a small ball four, kind of helps him become, and as he will shoot more threes, being put in the corner, playing kind of slower defenders. Maybe that helps more. His kind of true shooting percentage becomes more efficient. So maybe that kind of helps his raw projection. And just kind of having a better, because I think his raw for the last 2 years has been pretty stable and his best for his career. And then so maybe if you give him a better facilitator, that kind of helps.
Yeah, I mean, I think Carl, what best is him at playing the four, using his athleticism. You mentioned the true shooting percentage. I think, as you said, that moving that to the four, that becomes a number you're much more happy with. Free throw percentage, solid. So it's just, yeah.
Do you think how much do you think he's going to play at the four?
I think with Carl, because you'll have Kufos.
I think basically my theory is it's like you start, or like there's going to be times when he starts at the four and times when he starts at the three with Willie Cauley-Stein and DeMarcus.
Yeah.
And then those matchups where they start big, maybe they only play big for like the first 10 minutes and then the first 10 minutes of the first 5 minutes of the second half, something like that.
I mean, maybe 60% of his time will be at the four.
Okay. I think that kind of sounds right. I mean, they've been pretty small all preseason. And there's not really another, I mean, we'll get to the bigs in a bit, but maybe it's like Caspia is the biggest competition after DeMarcus is playing the four. Because I kind of see, it's like, I think DeMarcus is going to be the four and then Willie and Kufos are the centers. That's kind of, and then obviously DeMarcus playing the lone big when you're going small. Is there anything in like Rudy's game you want to see less of?
Well, the one thing I'd like to see a lot less of is fourth quarter late situation ISO time.
Yeah.
That
was really bad when DeMarcus was ill.
Oh, that was embarrassingly ugly to watch.
I mean, it worked once that time he missed, and then Carl Landry laid it in.
Well, there you
the
go.
other times he didn't. He missed, and it didn't go to a king. But yeah, I think that's going to be kind of, and maybe having Rondo. I guess we'll probably run out of time to talk about lineups today, but kind of like Rondo, if he were to play in the clutch, maybe that kind of helps having a more dominant offense initiator to limit the times that someone can just go off and start ISOing up in the clutch.
Well, yeah, and that goes to what we heard in the preseason about Rondo would be making his own plays in the fourth quarter. So, just having someone out there who will.
Well, he drew that up for Darren Collison. Would you? I guess we didn't talk about this when we were talking about the point guards, but would you want to finish games with Collison or Rondo on the floor?
What's the score?
All right, should we do 5 up and 5 down?
All right. I gotta think on that. Wow.
I think you have Collison in both, personally, because if you're 5 up, they're going to hack Rondo, right? And you're 5 down, you want the spacing and shooting.
Yeah, and you don't want more. Yeah, I guess.
I mean, maybe you want maybe when you're 5 down, you also want the defensive turnovers. So maybe that helps having Rondo out there and like better playmaking. So maybe if you had Rondo and then you have shooting everywhere else, so like Marco, Ben, Gay, and Boogie, maybe that's fine when you're chasing a lead.
Yeah, that's the one thing. If I'm down, I think I'd want the Rondo,
Okay.
Marco, Rudy, because I want scoring. And I feel like Rondo just
That's maybe a better like on-ball defensive unit. It'll be interesting though to see whether I think that's going to be kind of the most interesting kind of thing to look for. And it's kind of nice that there's like in the years past there's only really been 5 players worth anything, or not even that. So like having options at who's going to finish games is like pretty amazing.
yeah, and that's the biggest thing with is then such an increased amount of depth on the team. Because that's been their biggest issue. Now it's finally, wait, there's actual talent? What do you mean?
Yeah, I think just like getting rid of ISO, Rudy, and like reverting to that and like thinking that's like a way you win. Maybe like seeing LeBron fail at winning that way might help as well. Like solidify that, okay, that's not like a sustainable way to win games. We should move on to Omri Caspi. He didn't look that great in preseason until I think apparently he looked really good at Pelicans game, but it wasn't shown on TV. He did play a lot of Eurobasket though, so maybe that's just like tired legs. Do you want him playing at the 3 at all? I guess is my kind of question.
I want him at the 4.
Yeah, I kind of agree. And then that kind of maybe makes these comparisons not that great because I think it's like completely different usage. Again, he's like loads of really old comparisons, none past 99. Like there's only one past 94.
Wow.
And that and so that's Monty Williams in 99. So that's kind of interesting as like and I mean he has such a strange game, especially like attacking the basket. He always looks like he's out of control, even if he's makes it or doesn't make it. But he's really efficient shooting threes, even though his shot's kind of weird as well. But yeah, I agree with playing him at the 4. So it just kind of makes it hard for you almost have to, because there's not kind of like another small forward, you kind of have to have a really small backcourt to play him at the 4. So maybe it's just difficult matchup wise. But then I guess you're stressing the opposition's defense with that lineup as well, especially if you play him at the 4 and then you have like DeMarcus at center. I think that really stresses teams.
Yeah.
Is there anything really else to say on Caspi? I think he's kind of like, if we get kind of anything close to what he did last year, I'll be kind of more than happy.
Yeah, I expect him to. I'm happy about him going forward this season.
Then should we talk about Quincy Acey? He doesn't have a Carmelo. He's going to be interesting in terms of like he again gives you like he gives you a little bit more size and some spacing. I think he above the break he shot pretty well, but like not on many attempts. And although he looks like Reggie Evans, he doesn't really rebound like him. I kind of would rather see, I guess like to me, I'd rather see Eric Moreland as the 4th big off the bench. Just because I think his rebounding and like, even though he's not that tall, he still can kind of affect shots at the rim. So obviously he's a bit more limited offensively, but I kind of prefer that defensive presence that Moreland brings. It sounds like he's probably going to make the roster. Out of those 2 guys, kind of, who do you prefer, and are you kind of expecting anything out of either of them, or just kind of like trash time minutes?
For me, it's not close. I would take Moreland. It's just I want if there's not going to be that much. I want a big who can rebound, who can rebound, alter shots. If you can give me that, I'm more than happy as you as my fourth big coming off the bench. And just for me, Moreland offers way more of that than AC can.
They've really tried Moreland and Willie on the floor together a lot. They've done it in the one time. They've at least tried it a couple of times in preseason, and in summer league they tried it a lot. It didn't really work in summer league that well, but it's interesting in terms of like just having these like long bouncy bodies flying everywhere. But yeah, offensively it gets a bit crowded. Although I think like he's got like a running hook shot that goes in sometimes. But yeah, I really like Moreland. I think he's a fun prospect. And then like I guess Duje Dukan is like the other kind of. I guess he's a swing. I think he can only really play the 4. He doesn't look like the 6'10" he's listed, but he can shoot. I think that's all he can really do. But I think he'll be great for Reno.
Yeah, Reno bound. He can join Stockton there.
I think he'll make the roster over Stockton, just because Peja is like doing the development of Reno, so maybe he wants to keep him rosters. And yeah, he's got a sweet stroke for a 6'10" guy. He's listed as like taller than Caspi, but his shot makes Caspi look like a giant and him look like a shooting guard. It's pretty wild. But he does look like dwarfed by other bigs. So like your rebounding is just terrible with him on the floor, unless you have him out there with Boogie, or if you have like Gay at the 3, maybe then that kind of works, because Gay's like a really good rebounder for his position. Even when he's playing the 4, he rebounds quite well.
Yeah, I think
it's just hard for him to get out there. I mean, he barely played in preseason, so you can't really expect him to play much normally. Should we talk about Willie Cauley-Stein next?
Yeah.
So we've got some comparable players. Are there any that stand out to you?
Let me pull it up real quick.
So the one that makes sense to me is Joakim Noah, a 45% similarity, just because of like, I guess the playmaking isn't there in the same way as Noah can, but like just the effort and transition defense, and way he can switch, that kind of makes sense to me. If he's like half the player that Prime Noah was, I think that'll be exciting. There's some interesting ones there with like Al Horford and Channing Frye.
Channing Frye shocked me.
Yes, I guess that's just like maybe when Channing Frye came out in the draft, bigs weren't really shooting much, or at least free pointers in college. So maybe that's something. And like Al Horford as well is kind of interesting. LaMarcus Aldridge, Markieff Morris. So there's like a bunch of guys that like really don't match. So maybe the rookie kind of test isn't as good as the pro one.
But I feel like with Noah, if he can be a poor man's Noah, I'll gladly take that, because his defense, love it.
One kind of issue I've had with him so far is like rebounding hasn't been great. His hands look hard. He's actually been pretty good like grabbing offensive boards, because he can just like reach over guys and pluck it. But when he's trying to box out, he can kind of gets shoved around a bit, and he's just a rail. So that's something that will kind of improve. But it sounds like if he's going to be starting at least those kind of starting minutes with Boogie and Gay on the floor, he's not going to be as reliant to rebound as much.
Yeah. And I think that's a good job by Carl, just counterbalancing it, finding his weakness, putting him with players who have that strength.
And they've been switching a lot with him. That looks really good. Him switching onto other players, like smaller guards. I believe it was the Portland game where he completely smothered like a game tire in overtime. So that's like that's good to see that they're using him like the way he played at Kentucky, so they're keeping it simple. It's just like pretty much the whole time he's out there, they're either playing man-to-man or switching, and he looks really comfortable switching. And it's quite funny to see him switch with, I think that was the time the first Portland game, Myers Leonard got switched on to Darren Collison in the post, and he just didn't know what to do and like tried a fadeaway jumper instead of just backing him down and missed it. So it's just quite funny. You can get these matchups and just these bigs don't know what to do when they get a 6-foot guard on them. So that'll be fun to kind of see if they keep doing that. And they didn't even help Darren; they just left him on an island with Myers Leonard on him. So that was kind of hilarious.
How much do you think, given Carl's, typical of not giving rookies a lot of minutes, how much do you think Cauley-Stein plays under Carl this year or early on the season?
I think early on, probably about 22 minutes a game. I think at the end of the year, he's playing like 24, 28. I mean, it's just because they're not, he doesn't really need to make many decisions. So it's not like a rookie point guard or something, where like the whole offense is based on him. They're going to ask him to run to the basket in transition and then sit on the weak side and like get handoffs of dribble drives or like the drive dump off or like clean up. So offensively, he's like low usage, and it's like something he's been used to doing, being in like a dribble drive offense at Kentucky. And then like defensively, yeah, if they're just switching everything, I think that plays into his wheelhouse. And there's just so much pick and roll, like he can deal with that. So yeah, I don't see why he doesn't play much. There's not really much competition. I know lots of people's like, oh, you have 3 centers where they're going to play, but then we don't have any power forwards. So there's all those minutes. So yeah, I think he plays quite a bit. I guess it's just like whether he's conditioned enough to like play big minutes and back-to-backs, and if he gets gas quickly. But he seems to be running well and like have lots of energy and not slow down in games. And he just has like lots of enthusiasm, so I guess that kind of helps as well in terms of like he plays with lots of energy, so then that means you're just going to keep running even if you're tired.
Yeah. Well, there's one thing he said is when he gets tired, he's going to pull himself out immediately, so he doesn't slow the pace down, slow anything down. So.
And him and Boogie in transition defense is going to be fun. Just like behind block shots, there could be like 4 or 5 a game in some. He's just like, he's a really fun defender to watch. So yeah, I'm really excited about him. And like he even made that like turnaround jumper in like the end of a shot clock. So he's got like, at least he can maybe make a shot every once in a while. I know pre-draft there was like him just draining threes, but with no defender on him, which Boogie's been doing all up until preseason. Now he's like 10% from free. So
yeah,
as soon as the defender there, it changes. Should we move on to the other new addition? We've been talking about Kosakufos a lot. I guess like he's going to be kind of like, I think he's going to have a really big impact, but it's not really going to show much in box scores. But I just think like I'm really excited about him. I guess like the best comparable player is Scott Pollard. I know there's been lots like trying to compare this team to King's team, then with Vlade and Peja and Pollard as well. So maybe that's kind of like a fitting comparable player. I think we've talked about him enough, but is there anything else you wanted to like bring up about his game?
No, I think you nailed it perfectly. As long as you're a Kings fan watching the game, you're going to be seeing exactly what he's bringing to this team. And as you mentioned the Scott Pollard thing, I mean, because they list 10 comparisons, but that's the one I immediately jumped to.
Yeah, I think that and maybe Marcin Gortat in terms of like how he plays defensively, where it's like he does protect the rim, but not like really above the rim. But he doesn't have the same kind of mid-range game as Gortat does. But yeah, I think he's going to be a really fun player. I thought he was going to start but now it sounds like he's like before the preseason started. But now it sounds like he'll definitely be coming off the bench, and I think that's going to be really fun with like the shooters and him, and just like the way he plays pick and roll D as well has been much better to see than like previous years. And then there's only one more player to talk about.
The man.
Yeah.
Boogie.
So, I mean, these comparable players are just insane. It's Sean Kemp, Hakeem, Blake Griffin, Kevin Garnett, Tim Duncan, Alvin Adams, Pau Gasol, Al Jefferson, Chris Bosh, and Shaquille O'Neal.
Gracious.
I mean, I will say they're all similarity of like 36 to 27. So I think that just shows like how rare Boogie is. And like they have the top of his like WAR replacement level as like I think 13 wins. And the scary thing is they have his highest range is in the 2018 season. So it's like this isn't even prime Boogie yet.
Well, yeah, and you look at like the little thing, good, bad surface, blue, good. It's just everything is.
Other than 3-point frequency, that may go up as well this year, for good or worse, and then turnovers as well. But I mean, he holds the ball so much for a big man that I think like turnovers is going to happen. I guess he can.
Yeah.
In transition, he can maybe be a bit smarter, but I think he just needs to simplify when he's in transition. He either needs to like outlet pass or just go for the poster dunk and just like not try and become a point guard. Just either throw it up or just jump on someone.
Yeah, well, and that's one thing we talk about is things we want to see. That's one thing I want to see is. You don't need to be the ball handler going down the court. Just either pass and get the ball off or go for the dunk. Just don't do those bad things where you just don't, please.
But I mean, it's going to be interesting to see kind of how much he tries to play behind the arc. Again, like with Kyle saying after the Kentucky game, they haven't put any low post offense in. So I can't really take anything from preseason. So those are lots of 3 a.m. start games for me that I could have maybe been sleeping. But alas, they were fun. So with Boogie, like I know this like came out somewhere where they're talking about whether he could win MVP. The odds were like 100 to 1 when I took them, just because I thought that was like just a fun flutter. Do you think it's possible for him to become MVP, or is that like reliant on the Kings being like a 6th seed or something?
See, this would lead to my tangent about MVP voting and voters just looking for the team with the most wins. So, should he be an MVP candidate? Yes. Will he be up there? No, because wins are what the voters are looking for. So.
But maybe it's like wins out of beyond expectation. Because like Anthony Davis was there, and I mean they weren't exactly. Well, they just snuck into the playoffs. So then maybe if there's like comfortably a 6th seed or something, then there's like beyond expectation. Maybe he needs to have like under 10 technicals.
Well, yeah. Then that gets the thing with this MVP voting is reputation. I mean. Boogie barely got into the All-Star game last year because of so just I don't trust you voters, please. I don't trust you.
I think it'll be hard, but you never know. It'd have to be like too many stars aligned.
Just off what he can do alone, though, if there's that dramatic win improvement, he should be in the running, yes.
It'll be interesting. Do you have anything else to say? I mean, I could talk about like how fun he is to watch all day, but I think there's not really much to learn with him.
I could do a whole podcast on Boogie. It would be so much fun.
Out of those comparisons, which one do you like the most?
I mean, the one that
He's kind of like a blend of a couple of them. Like Shaq and Duncan together, something like that.
Yeah.
Because like defensively, I think like Duncan is like a interesting comparison where he's like, he almost kind of wins defensively now with like his positioning and like intelligence and just IQ, like getting charges, and like he's got a lot better with his verticality, and then just like hands in passing lanes, and I guess maybe he could be less aggressive just to make sure he stays on the floor for like as long as he can. I guess that could be, but then you don't want to like limit the amount he's disrupting.
I feel like, just stay aggressive, kind of just be more who you are, because it's led to this, and I'll take these results.
I guess we've been going for well over an hour now, so maybe we'll do lineups next week. Should we finish with who would you cut?
Yeah. So looking at the roster, I think we've already made some cuts with Stockton. We would cut David Duchcon.
Have we cut them?
Well,
I haven't seen that.
We've talked about them potentially as D-League guys.
Yeah. I think those would be the two. I think they'd probably keep Dukan on. I think because they just need to take one. I guess it's whether they keep 15 or 14 on the roster. Yeah. But I don't think it's not really a roster that they're going to be trading many people. So I think they would just keep 15. And so I think it'd probably be Stockton that goes, just because you've already got like another 3 ball handlers, or maybe 4 if you're counting Marco Bellinelli as a ball handler now.
Yeah, and actually, because I have a roster set up, right? So yeah, I did it 14 with Ducon cut, but with him back on the roster, 15. So yeah, just Stockton goes.
Yeah, so I think that kind of makes sense. And then, yeah, I think that'd be kind of the roster I would put together, and that seems kind of balanced to me.
And so much deeper than previous years. So much deeper.
And just like older as well.
Yeah.
I think if you think of like the additions they brought in, Bellinelli, Rondo both being 29, the same age as Rigay, then Costa Kufos like 26 or 27. So like everyone's older and like even James Anderson, I think he's the same age. Oh no, he's 25 or 26, so he's older than DeMarcus Cousins as well. So it's like I think this is the first time where they've actually built like a roster that's kind of like built around Boogie to win. Even Seth Curry he's only 10 days younger than Boogie.
Yeah.
So I mean that's just mental when you think of it in that kind of way. So like the young guys are Boogie, Willie Cauley-Stein, and Ben McLemore, and that's like completely different to any other team we've had. I guess like Moreland you can put in there as well.
And do you want to do win projection next week, or?
Yeah, should we do that next week, and we'll do lineups and look at the games. There'll be games in 8 days.
Yes, as you said, King season kicks off October 28th against Los Angeles Clippers. Will be the day before our next podcast, day after our next podcast. So next week we will be back talking about the upcoming games, talking about potential lineups, and of course our prediction of how the Kings will do this season. So yeah, it's gonna be fun.
So I bet the over.
Yeah,
whatever it is.
Pause the podcast, go to Vegas, bet the over, come back and thank us.
Or you could just live in a sensible country that just has legal betting.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah, we just have betting shops on high streets here. It's fine.
Oh.
But I mean, we do a lot of things differently.
Yeah.
But anyway, thanks for listening to the first one. And yeah, I guess we'll see you next week. You got anything you want to leave us with?
Just make sure to be following each of us on Twitter. Me, Matt Johnson, at MattJ _ on NFL, and at Oscar Hazel on Twitter. We are glad to talk about the Miami Dolphins or Sacramento Kings or Green Bay Packers or any topic you'd like to discuss.
If there managed to be an Ipswich Town fan that's also a Kings fan, then come commiserate with me and how the year's gone. But yeah, be fun to do this all year, every week. So thanks for listening. I guess we'll end this.
Yeah.